Hello, and welcome to Setting Up a Site with Dreamweaver. When you first launch Dreamweaver and you have a blank HTML file, you'll notice in your Files panel on the right-hand side, you'll see there's two pull-down menus. One says Computer, and if you click it, it'll show you hard drives and local resources that you can pull up and access, as well as another menu that looks at local remote testing and repository views, different sort of views of your files. As the way it's set right now, this is not set up for accessing the server with FTP or publishing your files to the web. In order to do so, you need to create a site setup specific file for Dreamweaver itself. And the way to really start this is go to the Site menu and choose New Site. When the Site Setup dialog box comes up, give it a name that is unique. I usually do my initials and then the particular class that I'm sort of working on at the moment. In this case, it's Introduction to Scripting Languages. Then I have to choose my local root folder, and at first it gives me a default. I don't really want the default. What I want is a folder that I've already created. In this case, it's on my desktop. And so if I choose that folder, you'll notice it gives me a pathway to that root folder for the class. Now, the next thing I need to do is add up the server so that I can actually connect to FTP and put files onto the web and access them. So if I click the plus button and I name the server with some specific information, in this case Web Design Interactive Media Server, and then give it a testing server address. In this case it's the same URL that will go up in the web URL at the bottom in a moment. Port number is automatically entered. Then for your username, it's first name, last initial. Password is your student ID number. And your root directory should be IMD 206 for this particular class. Now when I click in web URL, you'll notice it adds IMD 206 to the end of the URL. Between the slash after com and IMD 206, I need to add students. If I could spell, it'd be alright. Students slash and my username, then a slash before IMD 206. So it gives me an entire URL that matches my FTP address, adds students, my username, and IMD 206 to the end. Under more options, I need to make sure that use passive FTP is checked for here on campus. If you're on the wireless network or off campus, that would be unchecked. I go under Advanced and I want to set the testing server mode to PHP MySQL, which is what we'll use in a later class. We won't use it for this class, but what it'll do right now is when we go to preview a file and we put it to the server, we'll be able to test it from the URL rather than testing it locally on the machine. And then you click OK and it comes back and shows you some of your settings, and you got to make sure you add the testing server checkbox to this. And then when you click Save, it will create your site setup file, and if you'll notice, my local files is pointing to my desktop, and if I mouse over, you'll see I get the rest of the pathway. So it's on the hard drive, users, my name, desktop, and then my folder root IMD 206. Inside of there you'll see a couple of files already, like a site setup files that has some files in it. I can manage this by putting this in Dreamweaver here. Now, one of the things I want to make sure I do is I don't want to put this onto the server, so if I right click on this folder and choose Cloak and Cloak, let me do it the first time, you'll see a little red line gets drawn through the folder, meaning when I put all the contents of the file, I won't be putting this. The last thing to do here is go to Manage Sites and export this site setup file. And when you export, it asks you to back up my settings or share your settings. You want to back up your settings because you're not sharing this file with somebody else. And then you want to make sure you go to your site setup files folder, and you'll notice that I already have one created, so I'm going to replace it because maybe I've made some changes to it. Now that file is available. Let's say I come into Dreamweaver and I don't have my site set up, so here it's blank. If I know I have the STE file, I can click Import and go navigate to it, and it will bring in all of my settings so that when I click Done, there I can see my local files again. If I hit the button to detach the files panel, I can plug in and I can actually connect to the server, and then in a moment you'll see my files showing up here on the left hand side. And there's all my local files. And with that, I will put the files panel back on the right hand side, and I'm ready to go to work.